Now it's time for a look at the daily papers with the press review with Diptyque Laurent, who joins me in the studio. Good to see you, Diptyque. So lots of front-page reactions to a crucial vote in Israel on Gaza's ceasefire and hostage swap deal today.
Yeah, that's right. As the French newspaper La Croix notes on its front page, this ceasefire deal is so fragile, one that hinges on approval by Israel's cabinet, who will be voting in the next few days. And if they vote in favor, the ceasefire could take effect this weekend, or at least by Monday, and it would involve a prisoner swap between Israel and Palestine. Now, as La Croix's editors note, it's important to thank those who made this happen if it eventuates, but there are no illusions about it. The events of October 7th, 2023 will leave indelible traces on both Israelis and Palestinians. Meanwhile, The Independent, the British daily, has this very sobering front page today. The terrible cost of 466 days of conflict, it says. And you see this front page here in black and white, featuring a host of different figures, notably this one here. 46,788 Palestinians have died since the conflict broke out. You have 1.9 million residents in Gaza who've been forced to flee their homes. You have other figures as well, 345,000 people facing catastrophic hunger across Gaza. So certainly some very sobering figures on the front of The Independent today.
Yeah, staggering figures there indeed, Diptyque. Let's move on. Give us some of the reaction from the regional press now.
Well, this is from Haaretz, the center-left Israeli daily. This is the front page of this paper here. Headlining that bigger battles loom over the second stage of the deal. It says there that essentially that even if this deal passes the first hurdle, it's still fraught with obstacles and hurdles along the way, including the big question of whether Hamas will stick to its side of the deal and the fate of Israeli hostages between now and when, if they're released. The Jerusalem Post, the conservative Israeli daily, on its front page, focusing on a host of issues today. Notably here, in this article here, it talks about how incoming President Donald Trump has largely sought to take credit for helping get the ceasefire process this far and at least getting both sides to the negotiating table. But the Jerusalem Post says one must not discount the role that Israel's Mossad has also played, notably the director of Mossad, David Barnea, who's been sewing the pieces of this deal as far back as last May, including provisions for aid by opening up the Rafah border crossing. So you definitely see that there is a bit of jostling, at least political jostling, for who gets the credit for helping bring the ceasefire negotiations to this point. On the front page of the Jerusalem Post, you also have this article here talking about the loss of influence of the far right in Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. You have National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who are among those threatening to quit the government if the ceasefire deal goes ahead. And almost in response to that, you have this article here from this front page from Al-Aqba, the Lebanese daily close to Hezbollah, which on its front page calls these, dismisses Israeli as theatrics, saying that this is not going to change the fact that the deal will go ahead.
Well, Emmanuel Macron's visit to Lebanon is also making front pages there. He gave an interview to L'Orient-Le Jour just before he arrived.
Yeah, that's right. And it's actually making the front page today here. Emmanuel Macron, that interview he gave just before he arrived in Lebanon, and he has essentially hailed the election of Joseph Aoun as president, saying Lebanon finally has a legitimate and credible leader who will bring confidence to the region. And in this interview that you'll find in the pages of L'Orient-Le Jour today, he talks about a host of issues, including the question of the Palestinian state, the impact of Donald Trump arriving to the White House, and what a ceasefire could mean for the disarmament of Hezbollah in the north.
And Diptyque, a quick word now here in France, where we mark the 50 years since Simone Veil spearheaded a law decriminalizing abortion.
That's right. It was an emblematic law and a huge advancement for women's sexual rights. It's in the pages of the French paper Libération today. 50 years ago, Simone Veil stood in French Parliament and she defended her bill giving women the right to abortion. In today's Libération, the paper's spoken to 7 people who remember that period in French history, who were there, 7 women who were either patients, medical practitioners, or activists, who take us back to the aftermath of that decision, of that vote, that law passing through, a quote, transitional year for liberties in France. One woman recalls, for instance, that once the law had passed, they still had the hurdle of having to set up abortion clinics because certain gynecology wings in hospitals did not want to practice abortion. Many gynecologists at the time were also Catholic, so many didn't want to practice abortion or enforce the law, so it largely fell to the shoulders of GPs to run these abortion clinics to allow women to exercise that right to abortion.
Now, a quick word on the passing of the director, the legendary director, David Lynch.
Yeah, the 78-year-old's death came too late for many of the front pages who'd already published, but Le Soir, the Belgian evening paper, are headlining on it on their front page, the death of David Lynch, the trailblazing director of Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive. They describe him as a giant of American cinema whose influence was immeasurable, a, quote, wizard of images.
And finally from you, Dipti, Houston's police departments have been coming face to face with a rather unusual criminal, drug-eating rats.
That's right. You can read about it in The Guardian today. Houston PD have been lamenting, according to The Guardian, a systemic problem. Their evidence rooms have been infested with rats. And this room, certain evidence rooms contain over 1.2 million pieces of evidence dating back, in some cases, to the 1940s. They also have stored in these evidence rooms some kilos of coke, still stored there, even after the criminals have been convicted, have been sentenced, have served their crime and served their time and been released. So they discovered that rats had actually managed to break into the evidence rooms and then consumed large quantities of drugs, including marijuana and mushrooms, creating a very big problem for Houston PD. I guess rats are already a big problem, but drug-addled rats, I'm not quite sure how you're going to deal with that one.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. Why are they still holding on to cocaine from the 1940s?
That's also another big question
yeah,
that I need to ask.
That's what I'm asking myself. Dipti, thank you so much for that look at the daily papers.